One. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us in another of our series of Friendship Place webinars, where we talk about topics relevant to folks we serve and the activities in which we engage. And we're so excited this time to have something that is very important. It's opportunities to explore what to do when you're looking for work in uncertain times. And we have two wonderful folks here. Our AimHire team, Richard McKey and Martena Williams, are going to lead us through this. But first, I'm going to jump off with Jean-Michel and ask if you'd like to say a few words, Jean-Michel, and get us started.
Yes, well, thank you, Chris, and thank you to our speakers today, Richard McKey, who leads the AimHire division at Friendship Place, and Martena. We're looking forward to hearing from you and a little bit about AimHire. We started AimHire in 2011 in the aftermath of the 2008 crisis, when we were noticing that our population was changing from basically folks who had been in chronic homelessness, and we were now seeing people who were displaced by the crisis. We had never done anything about employment, and we thought we should, and built this wonderful model we call Job First, that is now in the DC legislation and funded again by DC and DOL, federal funding. We've presented this model at a number of conferences and trained other organizations in it. Richard is going to tell you how it works, so I don't want to steal his fire. But I will say that for the first time this month, the model will be presented on the international level. I'll be going to Portugal at the end of the month for a conference. So thank you so much for everything you do at AimHire, the two of you, and over to you, Richard.
All right. Thanks, Jean-Michel. I'm really happy to be here today speaking with everyone. I want to take a moment to thank all of our Friendship Place supporters, donors, volunteers, folks who have just heard about us through the grapevine, who are coming to join, or even for those of you who've never heard of Friendship Place before and are just here looking for some job tips. Welcome. AimHire, as a division of Friendship Place, now is supported by federal funding, by local DC funding, but it has largely been supported by private funds and by volunteers for coming on 14 years now. Private funds, the donations that you all support us with, whether you're meeting up with us at the breakfast where Chris and Jean-Michel speak, whether you have sent us a couple bucks online, or whether you've come out to volunteer. That is a huge part of what makes AimHire successful. We have volunteers working with participants face-to-face every single week. We have several essentially full-time volunteers. Well, they do a full a 6-hour shift down at our office on U Street, working with participants face-to-face, helping them to write resumes, apply for jobs, get out to hiring events, well prepared with everything they need to be successful. Jobs First, the model that Jean-Michel has taken on the road to Portugal, taking us worldwide, is really here because of folks like you. So thank you. We'll talk a little bit about the program, but our main focus today, what Martena and I really wanted to talk with you all about, was just to give you some job search tips, some ideas for you on your job search if you are getting ready to make a career pivot, getting ready to get back into private sector work, getting ready to take a look at employment across a pretty wide spectrum, just based on what we see are kind of universally applicable best practices and habits for job seekers, regardless of what kind of work that they are looking for, right? So AimHire's got a bunch of grants that support us, private funds that support us, foundational dollars that support us, and a team that helps a wide range of folks. So we help veterans, we help families, we help youth, we help DC residents. And then our privately funded grant helps anybody who can come into our office, whether they're housed or unhoused, whether they're unemployed or underemployed, whether they are looking just for a job that can help them make some money to get into their rapid rehousing programs in DC, or whether they've been housed and need some more funding, whether they may be working with a disability and just need additional funds to shore up their quality of life, and everything in between. A lot of the folks that we serve kind of fall under the same usual industries, I would say, and those tend to be building maintenance and cleaning, construction work, security work, administrative support, customer service, food service, event staffing, things like that. But I say those are kind of the usual suspects, but then we go and take a look at the folks we're serving, and we see just a smattering of a little bit of everything. And in particular, we're seeing a lot of folks supported by the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act. That's called WIOA. There's a new acronym for you if you haven't picked that one up. We're in DC, so we have to use acronyms. We're contractually obligated. But WIOA users, enrollees, have been referred to us through a Jobs First program. And these are folks with bachelor's and master's degrees and 10 plus years of experience in their field, just looking for new opportunities. Some are looking to make the jump from private to public sector, or vice versa. And we always get folks who have master's degrees in particular fields. They're looking to get into human services. They're looking to get into paralegal. And of course, many folks looking to break into IT, right? Looking for training opportunities or other ways to kind of get into those industries. So though, yes, a lot of our participants are looking for more entry-level type of work or hands-on, kind of labor work, we see more than half these days are looking for kind of the term used to be white collar jobs, right? Kind of skilled and technologically proficient type of work. So, that is to say that these are the tips that we give to participants looking for work in any of those fields, right? The idea is that the tips we'll give are supposed to be universally applicable, and we really do see them work across kind of every industry. We see that I think if there's one thing to take away from what we talk about here today, it's that the basics, kind of just being timely and professional in your communication, being thorough and following through when you're going through with an application, being kind and considerate and grateful for other people's time, even when you're kind of getting the runaround in an interview process and it may not feel especially considerate of your time. Just kind of paying attention to the little details as you go. That's the most important piece to take away, right? It's just to don't neglect the simple kind of standards of job application process and interview process, onboarding process, of just being on time, thorough, pay attention to detail, and be, kind and courteous to the folks you're working with every time, every application, even though you may have sent in 10 or 20 this week. That is what will land you the job. That's what will get you success. Quick on me, I've been with Friendship Place. I'll hit 7 years next month. I've been the director since October, AD 2 years before that. Job developer was my title before that. So I was working with a lot of different partners throughout DC, our employer partners who are hiring participants. And so I've had conversations with hiring managers pretty much every day, or at least once or twice a week, for majority of my career. Before that, I was a hiring manager. I did about 20 interviews a week, and I saw a wide range of candidates and interview styles and kind of the do's and don'ts in an interview. So I also saw on the other end, what kind of recruitment process me and my team were putting together and what makes for a good candidate experience. Kind of seeing what company you're applying for does with their candidate experience can tell you some interesting things about that company and about your job that may influence your decision down the line, right? But I truly believe no one knows as much about candidate experience and the hiring process as my teammate Martena. So Martena just joined the team in January, but she comes to us with a truly tremendous amount of knowledge about hiring and HR. I'll let Martena introduce herself. Once you hear what she used to do, I think you will agree. All right, Martena, that's my intro. I went on a little long. You're up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So thank you, Richard. I'm Martena Williams, and just to give you a little I'm the current AD Assistant Director with AimHire, and I'm very excited to be working with this organization, especially coming out of what has been over 16 years of experience, specifically in the talent acquisitions, which all pretty much just means recruiting, term a lot of large corporations like to use, and in developing the processes for hiring. I've worked with many large organizations, such as like Amazon, Hilton, Lockheed Martin. I've also worked for some more medium and smaller size organizations, many of which typically supported federal government and DoD contracts and work. A lot of experience. I have interviewed thousands of individuals at this point without any, literally. And I've served as hiring manager for many roles, especially with some of the smaller and more medium-sized organizations in Hilton, as well as for some of the positions that require maybe in the 5 years of experience or less with Lockheed Martin. And with that experience, I will say this: there's some things that I know that are fundamental across the board with organizations as to what they are looking for. I've written as far as position that first step from the application to being able to actually have a conversation with the recruiter or hiring manager and moving forward in process. So I've had a lot of experience with reviewing resumes, also writing position descriptions, and on the back end, whenever you're applying for jobs, all of those other questions that are asked after you upload your resume and give your name and address, what those mean. While those questions are asked and things like that, and some of that type of information I'd love to share with you all, just to give a little bit of an insider cue on what's happening when you jump into the world of what I call applicant tracking systems, which is the system that everyone jumps into with any employer as soon as you click from the job posting to apply now, that you enter into there, and how that filters into who sees things and how they're reading those things.
Wonderful. Yeah. So I thought we could just go over a couple of our kind of top tips, things that will apply to whatever kind of industry you are looking for, right? We can then talk about maybe a few myths or things to remember throughout a hiring process. I feel like there's a lot of mysticism about the hiring process. There's a lot of concerns about what's going on with AI, what kind of software is automatically reading my resume, what is going on behind the curtain, right? And it is true that while a lot of application processes are becoming increasingly automated, there are a few simple things that you can do to kind of make some of those automated things work for you. And at the end of the day, the robots have not replaced HR yet. It's still a human being. It's still a human being at the end of the day, making the call on your hiring decision, right? So if you can have a conversation with that human being, that is a hugely important piece of the process that will enable your success, right? So Martena, I'll start off, and then if you want to add ones as we go, or elaborate on anything I throw in, or just take one, we'll take it that way, and then we'll leave plenty of time. We'll leave plenty of time here for questions. We want to give some general tips, but also we'd love to answer any specific ones that you all have as best as we can. So we'll leave a good 20 minutes here at the end for your questions and to discuss. So, one to start is just don't neglect your basics, right? The thing to remember about your application process is that it is going to resemble a marathon, not a sprint, right? You want to make sure you're making slow and steady progress on applications as you get out there in the job market. So our participants, we recommend a minimum of 5 applications a week. Now, that is keeping in mind kind of all of the challenges that life throws at us. That's even in the face of weddings and funerals, right? Get 5 apps out a week if you're looking for a job. But in reality, if you have a good 40 hours a week to apply, we recommend 10 or even 20 would be a good pace to set. Right now, I know that is grueling. So there are, remembering to kind of take care of yourself, give yourself breaks, make sure that you are kind of approaching each application fresh, right? Not speeding through the process or, kind of skipping over fields or questions that may be asked. Really, double checking your work before you're done, because when you're on your 4th or 5th application of the day, it can be tough, to catch every field, everything that's asked of you, make sure you're uploading the right resume and everything else. So just double check your work as you go. We do recommend that even though websites like Indeed, CareerBuilder, ZipRecruiter, those kind of mass market application websites that are commonly used, Friendship Place, its jobs are posted up on Indeed. But though you may find opportunities on Indeed, ZipRecruiter, CareerBuilder, Monster, all of those classics, or through LinkedIn, ultimately we recommend, rather than applying through those websites, look for the posting, then find the website of the employer if they have a careers page, and applying there, right? Indeed and careers page don't always agree with each other. Sometimes you're going to get applications going in through the applicant tracking system, and some field or something or other has been misaligned. And now it's chewed up and spit out your resume, and it's not recognizable once it gets to the company you're applying for. Easy way to make sure you don't run into that issue, just go right on their careers page, go straight to the source, take the middleman out of it, right? That's not to say that those third-party sites aren't useful for finding opportunities, because of the way that Google is a little less precise now than it used to be. Those can be great ways to find the job posting, but to get the most updated information, the most relevant info about the job, all that good stuff, just go straight to the careers page and put the info in, right? So you come to the careers page, they're asking you to upload a resume, cover letter, etc. One thing that can really speed up this process while also maximizing your chances for getting hired for this particular job is to keep a master copy of your resume, right, with everything on it, all the details, all the licenses and certifications. But for a job that requires a focus on a particular field of experience that you have, but that may not be at the top for that particular position, create a copy, right? Just make an extra copy of your resume for that job and pop the most relevant experience in your repertoire right at the top for the recruiter to see, just, front and center, right? You can list everything else there. You can also do the good old-fashioned full CV available by request. That's a fine thing to do too if you just want to keep the relevant experience there. But put the most relevant, the one to match what's on your resume to what they ask for in the posting, right? So if they say, I want 3 to 5 years of program manager experience, put that right at the top, right? Martina, how long does a recruiter look at a resume?
7.5 seconds is the average. before they either make a decision to continue reading the rest of the content of that resume or skipping over, scrolling. Let's just say it's almost like swiping to the next individual
Yeah.
with that applied to that role.
Yes.
That's the reason why in that very first page, a little bit of maneuvering. Oftentimes, you don't necessarily need to create new content. It's just a reordering of the content that you currently have on your resume to move what is most relevant to that in that particular position and role. And that's what you want to move to the top. What you're going to see, something to focus on when reading position descriptions and job postings, is there's always a section that says either like basic requirements or minimum requirements. There's going to be the role and responsibilities is one thing, but in the basic requirements, that is the area, that's the first checklist, the absolute first checklist for recruiters and hiring managers. They need to be able to clearly see somewhere on your resume, preferably in that first page, that you meet those minimum requirements. That's why often you'd be surprised there's as little as possible, because the recruiters and hiring managers are trying to they're not trying to narrow down the playing field as much. They try to keep it as wide sometimes as possible, but including those basic requirements. So like Richard said, 3 to 5 years of program management experience. Even in the very top of the summary, you may want to say however many years of program or project management experience that you have, like under professional summary at the very top. So they're like, oh, yes, click, click, let's keep reading the full content. So that's, yes, Richard, very, very great point. Yes.
Yeah, I would also say if they ask for say for like program manager experience, but your title was, something of equivalent, kind of position within the organization, but your title, was like program logistics lead or something like that, go ahead and add program manager next to what your title may have been, or switch them or something like that. You can explain in the interview, hey, I want to be clear, this is my actual title, but I was performing the same roles, right? You can still be upfront about that when it comes to the interview piece, but making sure that those key words align with what's on the posting will make sure you don't get screened out, either one, by the 7.5 seconds the recruiter looks at it, or by the automatic scraping software that may take a look at your application before you go through, right? Similar with any kinds of licenses or certifications or preferred software that is used by the company that they list in the application. Again, top, right, front and center, right? You could put that above or below your experience. And then just make sure that all of the most relevant stuff is right there, ready to go. Next piece that we have folks ask us about a lot for the application process is the cover letter. These are definitely waning in importance these days. Many are foregoing them entirely. It can still be a good thing to have in your back pocket, but what we recommend is have a template for a cover letter. 2 paragraphs that gives an overview of you, who you are, what your work style is, how you get along with your team, what your values are, and have a couple sentences in there that you can swap in and out for an employer, right? Mm-hmm. If you have to apply to 10, 20 jobs a week, you really don't want to be writing 10 to 20 cover letters per week. I really hope you don't have to. That sounds like too much. Make it easy on yourself. Create a template and then make some minor modifications. The fact is, probably even at like the highest level in organizations, most recruiters are not going to be looking for a cover letter. Maybe 10 to 20% will be looking for a cover letter, if that. Definitely have it in your back pocket. You don't want to get to, the application point of the process and suddenly lose all your momentum because you had to write up a cover letter. But I think that unless you're applying for like leadership type roles, most places these days are not going to look for one, right?
Nice.
Yeah. Next, when it comes to filling out your experience and kind of filling in the information on an ETS, make sure you do that and check if it has read your resume info, that all of that stuff has gone through correctly. It can save a lot of time having that info be uploaded automatically if you upload your resume to a careers page. But again, your applicant tracking, your company's applicant tracking system is often created by the lowest bidder. It's not always going to be the best. Many companies are just getting by with what they can. They don't have a ton of budget for their HR, for their hiring software and all of that stuff. We're very lucky at Friendship Place that we have Paylocity, which is a fine HR contracting software system. Thank you, Paylocity. But not everybody is as well off as us. Sometimes it can really kind of fight the poor users of the applicant tracking system on both ends, the candidate side and on the applicants and on the hiring manager side. So just double check everything as it goes through. And again, we know that some of these sound like back to basic stuff, but we do see folks making these errors on our end when applying for these kinds of jobs. And it can really cost, right? Go ahead, Martina. Why don't you take it?
I want to quickly, exactly to what you're speaking about, chiming on resume format. So a lot of times, sometimes people feel like resumes that have a lot of interesting ways, it looks pretty almost as a flyer or a poster. That does not translate as well to most applicant tracking systems and being able to pull into the content that's on your resume.
Yeah.
It likes Word documents. Most of them, they like Word documents. They like Google Word documents and then PDFs, but especially MS Word is the number one preference where it can better parse in your information. Also, having the title of your positions, the name of the company that you worked for, and then what your responsibilities or accomplishments were together, like one line after the other, is the absolute best format, which looks a little bland, but if you want to be able to especially kind of expedite the process, then when you go and they say, you can apply and just upload your resume and it pulls over as much information as possible accurately into those fields. The simpler, the better. I really want to highlight that.
Yes.
So, yes.
Very good point. If you are applying for a graphic designer job, then your resume can look like a movie poster, right? And it should. I've had a friend who used to be a user interface designer for web apps, and her resume looked like a video game character's statistics. She made it look like that. But she was applying for a job in video games, so she got to get weird with it. If you're applying for a program manager position, don't get weird with it. Keep it nice and simple, because this way it's just going to lead to, one, easier to read for the hiring manager. You're showing that you're respecting the hiring manager's time and putting all of that info right in front of them. That's already going to be moving you ahead of the pack. But also it's to make less work for yourself, right? A beautiful format with the border and stuff like that. Again, this is where multiple copies of the resume can really come in handy. You can have an online, hey, I'm cranking out 10 applications today format that's nice and very simple and basic. You can also have another version saved that has the border, that has a little color, that kind of thing. That's your print version that you could hand to someone in person, right? That might be a little bit more eye-catching. That might be something to do if you are looking for that chance to have a more, dressed up version. But for applying online, absolutely. Word document or PDF, the simpler, the better, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about interviewing. Number one tip that I give all of our candidates about interviewing is if you need to reschedule an interview, don't. You don't need to reschedule the interview. The first time you put a time down with a hiring manager, unless it is an emergency, right? Then get there, right? And when communicating with a hiring manager to schedule a time, your goal is to lock the time in one email exchange, right? You want to give a suite of times when you are available. You want to give the most amount of times that you are available. You want to make it nice and clear, right? Monday, I'm good, 10 to 4. Tuesday, I'm open, 9 to noon or 1 to 3, right? You want to give them blocks of time, give them as many options as they have available, because hiring managers fill their slots in with interviews. It is, 10 to 11, 11 to noon. They are filling those slots in when they have open interview time. And once those slots are booked, speaking from someone who's been a hiring manager, it's a nightmare to reschedule most of the time, right? For a really strong candidate, I'll do it. If somebody has an emergency and communicates that to me, then I will do it. But you want to make scheduling just the easiest part of it, right? Sometimes there are things that we can't reschedule, right? Got to pick up our kids from school. We got that doctor's appointment we've been waiting months for. But for the most part, you want to make getting to that interview your priority, right? And try to move whatever else around it that you can, and avoid rescheduling if at all possible. If you absolutely have to reschedule, you have to give at least 24 hours notice, or as soon as possible in the case of like a true emergency. If you don't, you should essentially consider the posting closed. Most of the time, no matter how competitive a candidate you are, no matter how good a fit for the job you are, if you're already having trouble making it to a commitment, the hiring manager to his scheduled time for an interview, the hiring manager is that you're going to have a hard time winning back the hiring manager's preference after that, right? So that's again another back to basics, right? But consider that every part of the interview process, from scheduling it to how you show up to the interview, to how you dress for the interview, to how you converse with the hiring manager, to how you leave, to how you follow up the next day with a thank you email. Every piece is a part of your interview. Every moment is an opportunity to show your hiring manager, I'm good at time management. I'm courteous and respectful. I am good at scheduling and communicating. I have great email etiquette, right? I have great phone etiquette. All of these pieces are very, very strong opportunities to, get those points across, right? Martina, do you want to talk a little bit about best practices when you're actually in the chair and talking to somebody?
Yes. So when we get to the point when you sit in the chair and talking to somebody, I'm presuming they have made it through that first wave where we've looked at the resume and the application, and that first initial contact. That's what happens from when you put an application out in the ether to someone reaches back out to you, and now we can start moving forward with that communication with the organization. So what that looks like, oftentimes you're either going to end up speaking to one of two roles of individuals, right? There is either going to be either maybe a professional recruiting or person that's a part of their recruiting team within an organization, or the hiring manager, which most of the time the hiring manager is the person that is very likely to be the direct supervisor of the role that you applied to. And just to give a little insight as to often how the recruiter and the direct hiring manager work together, oftentimes in most organizations, they have a very close relationship. That is the individual who frees up some of the time from the hiring manager who has a functional role, right there. When they are not looking to hire someone, they have a completely busy schedule otherwise anyway. So this person is kind of to really learns a little bit of the ins and out of the function of the position and the role, what that hiring manager is already looking for soft skills, in addition to what was on the position description. That person is often the person who actually wrote the position description in the posting, or many parts of it, or did the final approval on what you saw, when you applied to the role. So once you've been started to work with that individual, they've reached out, they've called you. Oftentimes they're going to call, but they're always going to send an email. Checking your email regularly, consistently and regularly, where you otherwise may not. Your Gmail could be inundated with many other things, right? But really making sure you're checking your email to see that correspondence that actually comes through that says they're interested in, oftentimes what is just maybe initially a phone screen or a general conversation. Sometimes they may say they're interested in an interview, but oftentimes for the sake of really trying to screen out people who what is your true level of interest, who respond to any communications from that organization that they've applied to. Reach out to them via email, look through that email message, respond to the email, but also look through that email message thoroughly, because often they will say, you somewhere in the body of the text, call me at this number. Or maybe even, because a lot of times you'll receive correspondence that's coming through the applicant tracking system. It's an automated system. Somewhere in the body of that text, it'll have an email address of a person you really need to reach out to. That's not the same email address you received the email through. Right. And that's where you may see the different. So make sure you thoroughly read through the messaging, look for any phone numbers and email addresses where they've asked you to respond or reach out, and any communication method that's provided, use that to follow up, to really show that you are interested in that role. Right. You see a person's name, any names of anyone that's listed in that email, like follow up to that particular email, see if you can find, even if you go on that company's website, they'll tell you like what that person's email address is or a phone number for them, and try to reach out to them directly. Also, once you've gotten to the point of a phone screening or first interview, make it a point to, if they didn't include the position description, and oftentimes they will, and this is a clue when they're scheduling something, so you can see the position description, because the first 10 minutes of any initial conversation, 5 to 10 minutes, is really a checklist. The things that are on the position description serve on the position description, the basic or minimum requirements, and then the preferred requirements. It's a checklist that they're going through, and it sounds like a conversation, and it is, but they're really checking things off of that list. So you want to tailor what you're saying to those particular things that are within that position description. It is going to usually be later on in the first interview conversation that more genuine questions will be asked, and there's always usually an interview guide. It's not there. It sounds like everyone's winging it sometimes, but they're not. Everyone in the interview and in the interview panel have agreed upon the questions that they're going to ask. They've talked about the types of responses that they're looking for, and they're always going to usually tailor back to what's in the position description, but not only that, what is in the company that you're applying for in a general way, regardless of the role, what their values are and what their mission is. Look at those things. Figure out a way to tailor your responses to the overall company mission and values, to the responsibilities and job duties and minimum requirements, and preferred requirements in the position description.
Yes. And your other goal when it comes to conveying your personality, your work style, how you communicate with others, how you resolve conflicts, overall, your goal is while being authentically and wholly yourself, right? Within, sort of professional boundaries, you don't want to let them know every single little thing about you, right? But while still getting across, your personality, who you are, what your style is, your goal is to convince the hiring manager that you are the person they're going to be happy to see on Monday morning. When they clock in, they're a little groggy. It's another week. They're in the weeds, but Martena's here. She's got my back. Everything's going to be okay. That is the goal, right? You want to ultimately convince them that not only do you have the skills and the talent and the experience required, but that you will be easy to get along with, right? That you will mesh well with a team, right? The best way to convey that is inevitably one of the interview questions is going to come to some kind of conflict resolution. Almost every team will ask you that, or how do you handle a crisis or whatever. And they are looking for in your answer, the most common way candidates trip themselves up is to, when they answer that question, they talk about a time when their team was in a crisis. And if the answer includes blaming teammates, blaming customers, blame, trying to find fault in other places, or talking about a process that had gone wrong.
We don't want to do that.
Right? Rather than talking about, this is how I resolved it. This is how I supported my team. This is how I communicated about it, right? That is what they are looking for. A way for you to show that you're going to come into this workplace and create a healthy work environment, right? That you're going to bring a healthy work environment with you. Very, very important. Lastly, you want to send good old school, like sending the thank you notes. These days it's email, right? Or you can call them. If they contacted you through LinkedIn, you can send them an email, a LinkedIn message, right? However they got in touch with you. By the way, brief note on LinkedIn. Yes, you should keep your LinkedIn profile updated. No, it's not more important than your resume or your application or anything like that. Aim for one post a week following one of your industry trends, right? Look, make friends with other friends who are in the industry, see what they're talking about. Make a post that's kind of a riff on that, just so that your profile is just active enough for recruiters to find you. That's all you got to do, right? I think, yes, you want it to be open. It is an avenue for recruiters and hiring managers to find you. You do want to update your status to indicate that you are looking for opportunities. Last tip before we open it up to questions. We should have booked 3 hours for this, Chris. But last tip before we open it up for questions is something that John Gradowski, who's been volunteering with the AimHire team for the last 7 years, doing our orientation, something he says in every orientation, and it always plays out well for participants, is to let people know you're looking for a job, right? Let your coworkers know. Let other people you volunteer with know. Let your people in your church, if you go to church, know. Let your family and friends know. Post on LinkedIn, post on whatever social media websites you follow. Say what kind of work you're looking for, and give people reminders. Your personal network is an incredibly strong resource for finding employment. And we have had folks come down to the office and volunteer at AimHire. They've chatted with other volunteers, and those volunteers knew a friend of a friend, and that got them into a conversation that started them down a job opportunity. Now, the downside is that now I'm down a volunteer because they're working again. So that's kind of a bummer, but it's okay. We want our volunteers to be happy, and employment is always our goal here. So let people know, right? You never know who knows, who has a friend who may be looking, who may have an interesting opportunity for you. I think that kind of networking is 10 times more valuable than most networking events that you can attend, networking cocktail type things. Those are still fine. I think it's worth giving those a shot every now and then, assuming that they are specific to your industry and what you're looking for. Then they can be quite a good use of time, or at least a change of pace, right? But much, much more valuable than that, getting a referral from somebody who knows you is the most powerful way to get a job. As Martena knows from her time and talks about a lot, employee referrals are one of the hiring managers' very, very best friends,
Yes.
And something they pay attention to more than almost anything. Yeah. All right, Martena, I know we have so much more we could talk about, but
I
why don't
know.
we?
I have one thing that I do
Yes,
want to bring up
do it.
about, if you remember nothing else, folks. So about in an interview, when interviewers are asking questions about any question that starts with tell me a time about or when you've experienced something. These are called behavioral interview questions. Tell me about an experience you've had. Using something called the STAR method, and I am going to drop something quickly in the chat about that. The STAR method is what they're really looking for. They want to hear as succinctly as you possibly can. I struggle with this at times. I'm used to giving information to be very clear with candidates so they can then follow up with their hiring managers. I know what they're looking for, but with the STAR method. So they want to know, what was the situation? So think about these things before you go to interview. Maybe have 2 to 4 in mind. A situation that you were in. What was the situation? What was the task? What needed to be done? What was the action that you took? And what was the result of that action? Those 4 things, I call this the STAR method. Situation, task, action, result, is a way to frame your responses to questions during an interview. They're going to let's say, tell me about a time when you worked with a difficult client or a difficult manager or a difficult colleague or anything like that. You want to specify those 4 things: situation, the task, what actually needed to happen there. Like, why were you all even gathered? Like, what did the business need to happen? And then the action that you took and the result that took place, and make sure that they are all very clear, and especially that the action you took and the result that came of it are positive. So
Thank you. Well, there's so many follow-up questions, and the way you've closed really answered a couple of the questions that I was going to pose, but other people should put things in the chat because we want to make this organic. But when we spoke about preparing for this call, there was a statistic you had mentioned about every warm contact, when you talk about contacting your friends, is worth 50 cold calls, and and I think that is so relevant. It's so many folks may want to go into hiding when something unfortunate happens with their job, but it really does make sense to put yourself out there, if only to create that sense of community, that there are other folks out there, but also these warm contacts, they're what makes the difference here. We do have one question in the chat, Deirdre. I'm not quite sure. Are you asking the organization of our 2 presenters, in which case they are with our AimHire program, or if you're asking other attendees if they feel comfortable putting their organizations in the chat? I'll let everyone put their organizations in the chat, hopefully answer that. But I see one question or one message in the chat. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed. I have, if you all have questions, please put them in. That's better organically, but Lord knows I have questions too. So I'm going to start with my questions and let me fill in from there. What is, when one loses one's job or one finds oneself suddenly unemployed, the temptation might be to, I'm going to wait for the perfect job, and I'm not going to take something transitional. What are your thoughts on that?
Don't do it. Take something transitional. Making money is more than zero. Whatever the job's making, if it's less than what you used to make, it's more than zero. Now that is simplifying it quite a bit, right? That said, I do think it is critical not to wait on making income, right? This is a this is something that we see participants in our programs. This is what trips them up quite a lot. There are a lot of reasons why we don't take the first thing that comes along, right? You know, and a lot of reasons why we don't take, you know, what a lot of people refer to as like survival jobs. And I understand those, but there are more reasons, I think, to take them, right? One is, especially in a job market where trends are changing, right? Where the unemployment rate is increasing, uncertainty is not just something that is going to hit your bottom line, your wallet, but is also going to hit you mentally, right? It's going to hit your stress level, and nothing quite curbs that uncertainty than making some income, right? So, you know, that's the brass tacks reason, right? You know, whatever you would be making is more than zero. That's not to say you have to drive Uber or deliver pizzas or whatever, right? You can find something related to your field that's not quite at the same level of your current position, and get in there and start doing it, or even something part-time just to, you know, help get some income coming in while also leaving you with time to apply. But I recommend getting something, right? When your severance runs out, when your unemployment runs out, or even before, just go for it and start making income. Now, a lot of people are hesitant to do that because they say, well, then if I get a job that's like lower than my current, than my last role where I, you know, was a manager or something, but I got this because it was just open, but it's not related. How do I explain that on my resume? Don't put it on your resume. I don't put my first 2 waiting jobs on my resume because, well, one of the restaurants isn't even around anymore, so they couldn't call it for a background check if they wanted to. But 2, it's, you know, it's not really relevant to what I do. I do talk fondly about my work, my food service experience, you know, when I'm in interviews, because I learn more about customer interactions in that time than I ever did, than I did in many of my roles afterwards. But you know, but don't let, you know, kind of the fear of what a job will look like on your resume deter you from taking something while you are searching, right? Because ultimately your resume is yours. No employer is going to conduct such an extensive background check as part of your onboarding that they'll somehow track down that you've been, in fact, you know, working some other kind of position while you've been on the job hunt, and nobody would hold it against you even if they did, right? Everybody understands in changing times, and I will say this is sort of a shift that has occurred post-COVID. You know, the kind of the sort of stigma about work gaps, I think, has been alleviated somewhat, and the ability for people to talk honestly about what, you know, kind of happened to them when they see a work gap on a resume. You know, it's no longer like you're being put on trial to explain a work gap, right? You just have an answer, and you know, if it's taking care of a kid, taking care of a sick relative, recovering, you know, from a health crisis, or, you know, you got laid off because of COVID. Those are all things that I have heard and never swayed my decision on hiring even one time, because, you know, this is something that we do have going for us in today's job market, which is that a lot of today's employers are becoming increasingly more compassionate and humanistic because they see that not only leads to better work culture, but ultimately is something that they have had to embrace as the world has changed. So, so I would say, you know, you never know, especially as hiring processes do tend to take longer, right? Phone screen followed by a panel interview, followed by a final interview, followed by an onboarding process, depending on the company, could take as long as a month, maybe 2 months, right? And so many things can happen in that span of time. Don't wait. Put lots of irons on the fire. Take opportunities. If something better comes along, then take that and explain to your current employer, hey, I got a better opportunity. Who knows? Maybe they'll match your offer. Maybe they'll offer you another higher, better position if they want to keep you, right? But don't wait for the perfect thing to land. Give yourself options. And who knows, you may find something, a position, a new kind of work surprises you.
Thank you. We're coming up close to time, but I see 3 great questions in the chat.
Yes.
To hit on, even if it's a lightning round. And Melissa, thank you for your question, because it pivots to the one I was about to ask, which Richard just answered. I was going to ask about the gaps in the job history. How do you talk about that?
Yeah.
But Melissa's is a twist on that. How do you talk about a varied work history?
Sure. Martina, I'd love to hear your thoughts on
Yes,
this. Yeah,
I
go.
would. So about varied work history, I think so. What you want to maybe try to do is in a somewhat of a summary section at the beginning to address in I would say 6 sentences or less the reason why you may have opted or even what the history of the transition look like from one type of role to another, that you started off in one place and then you may want to say that the reason why you decided to then transition into another field or function, and give that reason why. And that reason could simply be because you are trying to explore opportunities that really resonated with things that would get you excited, right? About work every day. That's a very real thing. It's almost the reason why people sometimes change their majors in college, and a lot of people do career changes over time. So varied work history, it could be, and honestly, it even could be that the position maybe paid more, it was closer to home, it was more conducive to following a spouse around that's in the military or things like that. Give some very brief reason for why those transitions exist from one role to another in a summary type of way. Also, sometimes depending on the role that you're applying to, you may not need to necessarily address it in the resume, and just be prepared to address it more when you get to an interview stage if they ask you about it. So one of the things I think oftentimes we're very concerned about, things that we're nervous about that employers may see as negatives, but we may actually encounter they never ask about it or inquire because it's more common than you think. Much more common than you think.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think the key is just look at the pieces of your experience, find something that applies to that position you're applying for from the various types of roles, right? Just find some skill or something that you use in that position that could be applicable. Really quick, we will get to the last 2 questions, but I wanted to add that we wanted to give you all a jump start. I put in a Prince George's County employee career transition resource fair happening tomorrow. So certainly a tight turnaround, but it is designed for folks either transitioning out of federal employment or from other sectors into working for state and local government in Prince George's County. So that's out there tomorrow. The Eventbrite link is there. And there's Martina coming in with
Yes, there's
a
another one that the
DC
District
link.
of Columbia is doing.
Boom. We got Maryland. We got DC. We don't have a Virginia one today.
It's a little bit later.
We can. Well, we'll find a Virginia one too. But that's pretty good.
Yes.
We had a question. We had a question from Anne. What do you recommend for first-time job seekers, recent grads, or moms entering the job market? I mean, there are a ton of outstanding entry-level positions out there in the world. There are a lot of recruiters who are looking for candidates who want to be trained, who want to grow their skill set. Building that first resume can definitely be tricky, since it will be, education focused and, talking more about life skills. But for entry level roles, that is okay, right? I think the most important thing for those those candidates coming into the workforce for the first time is simply to be upfront and say, this will be my first job, but these are the skills that I bring to the table from, my babysitting experience or my internship or, my time supporting and raising my family, right? Looking for license opportunities to kind of get that first piece of licensure that entry-level positions may need can certainly help too. Just coming in and kind of advertising that you've been through some sort of licensing program, say for home health aid, getting a license or cert for that, along with other prerequisites like CPR, or any other kind of piece of licensing that may need to be required if you're looking for food service type of work. Starting off with a ServSafe certification to just show that you're not throwing your app out in every direction, that you are interested in this entry level field in particular, is a great way to catch the eye of a recruiter as you're entering the job market for the first time. Deirdre asks, can you recommend some great resume building sites? I think it's best to make your own using a simple template. I'll be honest. I think that most of the time when a resume building site is offering you a service, what they're trying to get at is to upcharge you on getting the paid version. Really, like, your name, your contact info, the position, the job title, a brief description of the overall, role, the years you worked, 5 to 6 detailed bullet points about what you did. Do that for each job. Education at the bottom.
Yep.
Licenses under that. That's really it. And I appreciate you asking that, Deirdre, because I that may not have been the answer that you expected, but I do think that it pays to remember that simple and clear is best. For the resume, right? And that I would say don't overthink it, right? There's a lot of time and energy. I mean, if you Googled how to resume tips right now, how many results and hits would you get? Most of our time working with participants on resume is updating them, right? Just adding the most recent job. That is very important. If your position says 2022 to present, but you don't work there anymore, change that, right? You want it to be. You do not want to explain to a hiring manager, oh yeah, I got to change that. Don't say that. Just change it, right? Make sure it's up to date. But also kind of pulling apart some of the weird formatting and other things.
Yes, that's why you don't do use some of those.
Yeah, nice and simple on Microsoft Word. Go ahead, Martina.
One thing very, very quickly is I would say this. So instead of Googling tips on putting together a resume, what you want to Google is the types of positions that you've actually done, because oftentimes people struggle with articulating what their previous experience had been. Sometimes looking at other positions, so you almost like you're looking for those roles, and you look at somehow what is listed in some certain other position descriptions that for positions that are currently open, to see if you've done some of those types of tasks, and that gives you a little bit of insight of how to articulate even on your resume that which you have actually done. But yeah, a lot of the templates pull in that strange formatting that looks fine on your end, but does not transfer over to an applicant tracking system. It's the worst.
Yep.
So they actually can't, recruiters and hiring managers don't see the same format you see when you put it together there. So plain Word, Microsoft Word, or Google Docs, because that's free. Let's talk about some things that are free. Works very, very well.
Yes.
This was wonderful. Thank you, both of you. And thank you for great questions in the chat. This is a time where we all need to work together and, building on what we spoke about earlier, building building a community of people all moving in the same direction is so powerful, and it's going to enable each of us individually to expand, to further our own goals if we work together. And again, thank you both. I know how busy you are to spend time like this doing this. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our audience does it well. So thank you both. Jean-Michel, I'm going to let you close this out.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Richard and Martina, for this excellent presentation. There was so much information in there. It's really, really useful. Looking forward to other conversations, because I do think we need more time. Yes, another time maybe. Thank you, Chris, for organizing it. And of course, thank you to all of you for being online with us this afternoon. Thank you for your support. We need you and appreciate you. Be well.
Sign up for our Walk to End Homelessness, May 3rd. You'll find it on the website.
Right.
It's a great networking event to talk to folks about the kind of work you're looking for. I talked to a Friendship Place supporter who gave me some great house hunting tips. So hey, how about that? While you're strolling along and chatting, it can be a great place to make friends and maybe line up an interview.
You can bring friends.
Yes, friends.
Exactly. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.